Senator David Carlucci. And welcome back to the state capitol. It was announced last week, of course, that the now minority Senate Democrats were going to be even more in a minority than they may have thought, with 4 Democrats breaking away from the mainstream Democratic conference and creating their own self-styled independent conference. The group was led by Jeff Klein of the Bronx, Diane Savino, also a well-known Democratic senator from Staten Island, David Valesky from up in Syracuse, the kind of a survivor of the upstate bloodbath that a lot of Senate Democrats were the victims of or caught up in. And David Carlucci, a freshman senator, brand new, 29 years old. One of the lobbyists around here is saying he looks like a boy. He's not quite a boy. He's here with us now. He's 29 years old. But interestingly enough, he's a guy who beat a veteran Republican, Scott Vanderhoff, the Rockland County executive, in a race that Vanderhoff was widely expected to win. David Carlucci was the former clerk of the town of Clarkstown in Rockland County. He grew up in Rockland County, well known, and he had to work very hard to win a race like this, given the baggage that the Senate Democrats were carrying. And, of course, it was that baggage that cost them or contributed to costing them the majority. With that as background, let me welcome Senator Carlucci to the show. Good morning, Senator. Thanks for being with us.
Fred, thanks for having me.
Great to have you. It must be exciting to go from town clerk to a state senator here, and all the issues that have to be dealt with statewide. How do you like it so far?
Well, it's an absolute honor and a privilege to be here and serve the residents of my community, and look forward to rolling up my sleeves and getting down to business.
Well, I've been here a long time, as you know, and people who have been around even longer than I have said they never saw a kind of a rump breakaway faction as this new independent faction amongst the Democrats is. Why would a freshman do something like this? After all, I suspect it was the Senate Democrats campaign committee that helped you a lot winning election. You must have had some gratitude for that. Why did you decide to, just coming in as a freshman, why did you decide you already knew enough to break away from the main Senate Democratic Conference?
Well, I mean, first, to go back to the help that I received on the campaign, I received a lot of help on the campaign from different people, seniors in my community, young people knocking on doors every day.
How about the money, though? Probably a good deal of it came from Jeff Klein, who was then heading the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee. Is that right?
Yeah, money came from the DSCC, absolutely. And I always said, look, I'm running to represent the people in my community. Right now, people are suffering in Rockland and Orange counties. Seniors getting squeezed out of our community because of spiraling out of control property taxes. People are losing their jobs in record numbers. And I was running not to be beholden to any leader, any Democratic boss or Republican boss, but the residents of my community. And it's as simple as that. And I could have stayed as town clerk and hung out there in my town. And I said, look, I'm not going to wait for it to be someone else's responsibility to clean up the mess in Albany. And I didn't run to get a nice office or a nice committee spot. I ran to really shake things up and try to move New York in a new direction. And I really think that if we do what we've always done, we'll get what we've always gotten. So I thought this was a good move to try to make some sense out of what's going on and try to break the gridlock that's plagued us here in Albany.
Well, did you develop a relationship with Jeff Klein during the race? Is that how you found out about it? Because he's the leader of this group. Is that how you found out about his intentions?
Well, I developed a relationship with Senator Klein and the other senators throughout the conference, and I found that we had a lot in common. We felt strongly about some of the issues that are important in the suburban areas in New York, and I think we talked about our frustrations with the current leadership and the conference, and we thought that this would be a good way to, we're Democrats, but we thought that we need to be independent. I always said, look, I'm an independent Democrat, because people, like you said in the opening of this segment, that people were really concerned about electing a Democrat from Rockland County. They said, look, you can't be beholden to the interests of New York City. And I said, look, I'm a Democrat, but I'm an independent Democrat. And what I mean by that is that I don't answer to the leadership, I answer to the residents of my community.
When did the idea of this separate conference get broached with you? Was it discussed even before the election, or when did I assume it was Jeff Klein who first raised it with you? When did you first hear about this as a possibility?
Well, we started talking about it just before the end of the year.
So that would have been 3 weeks ago or so?
Probably, yeah.
And initially, what was your reaction when you heard the idea of breaking away from the 30-member minority, which would have a lot of power if it stays together, a 30-member minority, and creating a 4-member block out of it?
Right, of course, very, nervous at first because
it's risky.
Absolutely, it's very risky, and it's a bold move, especially for a freshman senator, and I I have deep respect for the colleagues in the Democratic conference, so I don't want to do anything to really hurt
All of
them.
them, or just some of them?
Pretty much all of them. I have respect for all of them, and I might not agree with some of the stances on them, but that doesn't mean I don't respect and like them personally.
What about the claim, though, that this represents opportunism by these four Democrats, that the Republican majority, Dean Skelos and company, will be taking care of you, that you're going to be getting extra staff allotments? Allegedly, that hasn't happened yet, or maybe better offices and maybe other kinds of considerations, such as in redistricting. Was that ever raised with you at all as a reason to create this independent bloc?
No, the only reason the opportunism there is to get legislation passed, to make sure that we can work on strong economic development so that we can help the Hudson Valley thrive. I mean, we have one of the largest private employers in our community, Pfizer. They're leaving. 2,000 good-paying jobs leaving our community. That is devastating.
Sure.
And what we've got to do is be strategic in our approach and how we're going to attract businesses. We know that manufacturing really is not going to work out well in Rockland County. When they can produce a vitamin like Centrum for pennies on the dollar in Virginia, they really can't do it in New York. But what we can do is be a place for research and development, for biotech, and focus in on that.
By the way, when you were talking about producing Centrum, I thought you were going to say in India or China for pennies on the dollar. Why couldn't we produce Centrum in New York for pennies on a dollar the same way they do in Virginia? What's so different about New York and Virginia?
If you go to Rockland County, I mean, our property taxes are tremendous compared to they are in Virginia. Right. And our utility costs, we have the highest in the nation. So I met with the people at Pfizer. They've been in Rockland County for over 100 years.
I think it was originally a New York company.
Yeah. I mean, it was Letterly. They developed, they worked to develop the polio vaccine. I mean, they've done great things there. We produce Prevnar right now, one of the largest vaccines in the world. But yeah, they're going to other countries, other states. So
it's been a sad story here in New York for 40 years.
Right, and that's why I'm so excited about the governor. When he's talking about New York is open for business, and we've got to do that because we have a crisis right now. $10 billion in debt or deficit. And we've also got a unique opportunity because I think all options are now on the table, and we've got to make sure New York is sustainable. But we're not going to tax our way out of this problem because I think that's just a short-term approach. We've got to look at the expenditure side, but we've also got to look at how are we going to increase revenues in New York? How are we going to make sure that New Yorkers have access to quality jobs?
How would you do that?
Well, like we talked about with the economic development, I think we've got to get strategic, and that's what I like about the 10 different...
You're talking about growing the private sector to produce
exactly.
Not raising taxes or...
No, I think if we raise taxes, we're just going to move people out of New York. And where I am in Rockland County, I'm very susceptible to that because we're right on the border of New Jersey. Connecticut's only 10 miles down the road.
No question. Do you then oppose the extension or the renewal of the so-called millionaire's tax, which kicks in at $200,000?
Right now I'm not in favor of that. I think all options are on the table. We have to, the devil's in the details.
Yeah.
But that's another reason that people move out of New York State.
No
and where we are, right on the border of New Jersey, people go to New Jersey for everything where I live. They get their gas, they get their clothes. And
cigarettes,
that's no
I would think, if they're smokers. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, everything is lower, even though New Jersey overall is about as high a tax state as New York.
Right, but I think they do a better job when it comes to economic development because if you go, we're right there with Bergen County. Rockland County, you could count the amount of corporate parks on one hand. Go to Bergen County, it's corporate park after corporate park after corporate park. Yeah. We've got to do something to make sure we have revenues in New York.
Before you joined us, I was reading a Buffalo News editorial today, which, among other things, referenced Niagara Falls. I don't know if you've ever been out there, but you contrast the New York side of it, which is decayed, decrepit, with the Canadian side of it, which is really prospering. And we see that in many areas around Pennsylvania border. With New Yorkers going into Pennsylvania to buy cheaper gas, and businesses going into Pennsylvania because energy costs are lower, taxes are lower. And by the way, in Pennsylvania, they actually drill and extract gas from the ground and sell it and make hundreds of millions of dollars, where in New York we're still dallying on it. Just quickly, you seem to have an ally in Governor Cuomo, who you praise. I would argue from a position point of view, you probably have an ally, if he's telling the truth, in Dean Skelos and the Senate majority. But how do you view the Assembly Democratic majority and Speaker Silver, who appears, and he's already being described that way in light of what's happened in the last few days on a seeming linkage between a property tax cap and New York City rent regulations? It seems as if the Assembly Democrats once again will be the advocates of higher spending, maybe higher taxes, and the kind of special interests which have driven the state to the condition it's in today. How do you view the Assembly Democrats? Are they allies or are they enemies for your community?
Well, I know the assembly people in my district, like Assemblyman Ken Zabrowski and Ellen Jaffe, are definitely allies, and I think they'll be able to work with the speaker to make sure that we make New York sustainable. I was really happy to see that Shelley Silver was in favor of a property tax cap.
Well, but the devil's in the details,
You're
as you know.
exactly right.
Yeah.
The devil is in the details, and that's what we'll have to work at. We'll have to make sure that all the stakeholders come to the table and work out a property tax cap that's equitable for our school children. Because the last thing I want to do is hurt the school children.
So what are you suggesting, that the cap shouldn't be a cap?
Well,
that you're
no,
concerned that the cap may cap too much?
Right. What we've got to do is we've got to alleviate the unfunded mandates that are pushed down from Albany. One of the things that I'm working on right now is legislation that would allow municipalities to pool their employees under one health care plan. Right now,
makes sense.
Yeah, right now, if the town of Clarkstown and the Clarkstown School District want to pool their employees, they can't. So we've got to do common sense approaches. I mean, working in local government as the town clerk, it's the hub of local government. You see so much. I deal with all the different state agencies, and you see so much waste and so many ways that we could streamline government into the 21st
But as you well know, as having been a town clerk, there are so many interests out there that benefit from the waste, and they're the ones who are fighting to stop it. Senator David Carlucci, a freshman with a big challenge in front of him, I thank you for coming in this morning. I'd love to have you back sometime soon. Maybe you could, later on in the year, give us a sense of what the reality of Albany is compared to what your expectation was. So thanks again for coming in this morning.
Yeah, look forward to coming back. Thank you.
Okay, great. This is Fred Dicker live at the State Capitol. We're going to take a break for the news, and when we come back, another guest.